Welcome back to Invest Africa. Remember, we value your suggestions and feedback, so please send an email to investafrica@abn360.com. It's up on your screen right now. Still unpacking this week's topic, the role of CSI on the continent. With me is Kone Gugushe, Divisional Executive for Corporate Social Investment at Nedbank, Mthandazo Ngwenya, Chief Financial Officer at Chikululu Social Investments, and Eunice Silliman, Chairman at KPMG. And joining the discussion in a moment, we will have Joseph Ugutu, Chairman at Safaricom, and he's in our Nairobi studio. Let's come back to the issues at hand and prioritizing CSI spend. Health, education, where does it go? How do you make those decisions?
I think because the problems are so large, one, for us as a business, it's important to link it back to what our business strategy is. But also it's important to understand that, as I said earlier, we don't exist in a vacuum. We need a society that thrives so that our business can thrive. So we need to support our clients. At Nedbank, when we say we want to be Africa's most admired bank, we say by our people, our staff, our clients, our regulators, as well as our communities. So it's important that we have a holistic that covers all of those areas.
Mthandazo, from where you're sitting, which sector is achieving the most spend when it comes to CSI?
Well, most money is definitely going to education. A lot of organizations are focused in funding early childhood development, primary school, secondary school education. Also, a lot of money is going into tertiary education and the entire higher education field, which I think is an adequate and correct focus for a lot of companies, because education is the bedrock upon which we could start to move a significant number of people out of poverty into more self-sustainability, and talks very nicely with a lot of the national development plans of the state.
Coming back to Sizwe Nqasana's initiative, we need more alignment with government, unions, private sector, across the board. Are we going to need more champions like Sizwe to make sure this happens?
Definitely, definitely. I think this is the first of many initiatives, and that's why big business is driving it. You know, this initiative literally is being run by Sizwe in his role as a member of Business Leadership South Africa. And I think we're going to find more of that. And it's about how can we meet the demands of the communities. There's a huge request for funding, but there isn't enough funding because of the, the economic crisis. And so I think it's about now giving time. And this initiative is about all of us getting together and doing what we can to uplift the communities by investing more time rather than just giving money. And there is various tools as well. When you talk about priorities, there is a project evaluation matrix that people can use to consider different requests for funding or for time. And that's the sort of thing I would encourage more people to do, is to have a proper tool to monitor and to manage these kind of requests so that they spent wisely.
What about the measurement of a CSI? That must be difficult to demonstrate the value.
With having to measure more accurately, as well as just report the return that you're getting, it's very difficult to measure. And also, the results of the investment that you make take time to come to fruition. When you give a bursary to a student, it takes time for you to see how you've actually changed the life of that person. So I think it's a mix of the patience, as well as then setting up upfront a framework of objectives that you have that you can then be able to measure against.
We're joined now by Joseph Ugutu, Chairman at Safaricom. Joseph, thank you so much for joining us. We've had a West African perspective when it comes to corporate social initiative at the beginning of the show, and perhaps now we can bring you in with that East African perspective, bringing it back to what specifically Safaricom is doing in Kenya itself.
So thank you very much. Safaricom Foundation has been on now for the last 10 years. And over these last 10 years, we've been able to invest in various projects amounting to about $250 million. But the key thing for us during this period is the need to work with communities in order to develop with them. And we are really focusing on projects that transform lives, projects such as water, and where we've been able to put up water facilities, we've been able to dig boreholes, we've been able to dig shallow wells, and we've seen how lives have been transformed simply by being able to provide water that is available, that is at a very short distance, so that the mothers and the women don't have to travel long distance in order to fetch water. We've also been involved in water, in conservation, environmental conservation. We have done a lot in terms of fencing the big water towers. We've been involved in the reforestation, where our staff and others have been able to plant trees.
Joseph, we've been discussing extensively in studio the need for collaboration among not only other private sector players, but also bringing in the government and unions, other organizations. Are you seeing collaboration in East Africa?
Yes, indeed. We are now collaborating with a number of firms. I can give you an example where we are working with Coca-Cola, for instance, to provide water and sanitation to schools, and that is working quite well. We've also been involved in a multi-company and multi-sector initiative known as Kenyans for Kenya. So we were able to raise from a number of sources about 667 million Kenya shillings and a further 300 million in kind. So we've been able to put a big dam in West Pokot. We are now working in Turkana to provide farming, particularly greenhouse farming. And again, we are seeing lives being changed. So
Joseph,
yes,
I just need to bring it back.
Collaboration is the way forward.
Absolutely, collaboration being the way forward. Bringing it back to Johannesburg and Kone Tandazo. Eunice, if you can just take this theme now a little further and say, we're collaborating within our regions, so Southern Africa, West Africa, we heard earlier from Ken, and then obviously now from an East African perspective. What about an African perspective? We start collaborating across the continent. Eunice, let's get your thoughts.
I would want to refer to something that actually started off in East Africa. It's called Alive and Kicking. It's a messaging tool which is a soccer ball, and with sport being such a big sport, especially soccer, we as a firm actually adopted as well this initiative across the continent, because a partner of ours in East Africa, Charlie Appleton, is driving this as the chairman of that board. And so I think that kind of messaging is important from a healthcare point of view, because the messaging that's on the soccer ball is about, let's say, malaria, you know, what not to do, HIV and AIDS, and that sort of thing. And I think it's important that we have unity in terms of communicating through vehicles like that, and also creating employment for the people that manufacture these soccer balls in Africa, for Africa.
A Pan-African strategy requires big thinking. We've seen an example coming forward from KPMG. Mtandazo, are you seeing other examples out there?
Well, you know, our perspective is that a lot of the South African companies that are growing into Africa are spreading their sources of profits to other sectors, segments of the continent, and to only think about CSR in South African context will not be sustainable long term. However, because of a highly developed regulatory framework here, it's possible to export some of our learnings, certainly first into the Southern African development community, and then look at maybe harmonization of legislation so that companies can find it easy to implement CSI type initiatives at a SADC level, and certainly engage with the rest of the continent on that basis.
Kone, I'm coming back to Joseph. I'm coming back to you in Nairobi, just to get an indication of whether you are moving beyond the East African borders and extending across Africa.
No, unfortunately, we are not. Our foundation is mainly focusing on projects within the country. Yeah, but within the wider Vodafone family, we do participate, for instance, in a project in Tanzania, which is dealing with fistula, so supporting that. But as a company, we predominantly work within the country.
Kone, coming back to you and your thoughts in terms of where you see CSI, corporate social investing, going within a 5-year time span, and again, looking at that African context.
Certainly, I think that there will be growth in this sector. I think that there will be consolidation in terms of the number of initiatives that are being done.